Well, all right. So this is the second video of the series, and one thing that I want you to see is just my leaves, just my progress so far on my leaves. One thing that I have tried to do with my leaves is to not only introduce color, but I'm also introducing and picking back up the black, white, and grayscale that you see surrounding that. I'm more than likely not going to color every single thing. So with doing that, reintroducing some of what was there, it's very important for unification with your artwork. So if you look at this on the very far end, on right here on the leaf area, it's mainly natural and warm looking colors. But if you see with the introduction, and I just started with this, of the blueberry, you see that it is very cool. So when you do a piece of art, it is good to have opposites across from each other and kind of jumping around here and there. But one thing also that's very important is if you do have something that is extremely cool, and then on this side where you have things that are warmish and neutral, what you're going to need to do to unify this with this is to introduce some of the yellows and some of the browns and possibly even some of the greens to what's here. So in trying to merge these things, that's what I'm going to do. So I put a little base tone of blue, and it's interesting to me, just with growing blueberries in my yard, I do actually see different tones. When you pick them up in the grocery store, they're, kind of a darkish, bluish, even has like a purple hue to it. The ones in my backyard, there is a type called powder blue. And they basically, they look pretty much the way that I'm describing them. They do have some of that element in it. That's just this very light, beautiful blue. So I'm introducing just the yellow ochre in with that, and it's starting to kind of merge just a little hair with what's going on in the other side of my work. So one thing too that I would tell you, I know with watercolor, a lot of you guys are used to just sitting down and painting that way, and I think that that's okay to a certain extent. But at a time, to make sure that things holistically look good, I would recommend just getting up every few minutes and just seeing, what is going on in your piece. So once you do that, you can really just kind of gauge as to how it's going to be. How, if you have this hanging up on a wall, how other people would actually perceive this to be. So it's starting to get there. And my thing with adding colors, you're just kind of dabbing. A lot of what I do with watercolor, you can just see my surface is relatively wet that I'm working on because I added the blue, and so the blue is wet. And what's happening here is the yellow is trying to soak in and merge a little bit with the blue. So we honestly, until it dries, we don't know how it is going to truly be, because what happens with watercolor is when you apply it, and if you've done watercolor, which I think you have, if you apply it, initially it seems very bold and bright, and then all of a sudden it kind of fades and merges into your paper, and you have to add another coat to what you're doing. And it's a media where you have to be extremely patient, because if you're not, your work's going to end up looking relatively muddy, and you don't really want that. You want it to be, you want watercolor to be airy and light and all that good stuff. So that's why as I work, I'm starting to blot my work. So at this moment, I'm adding kind of a plum looking purple to my piece. And it's a very strong purple. So once you put down, so I'm just doing little by little, and once you put down something and you're like, oh my gosh, it's too dark, it's too crazy, take a step and just kind of look at it from a distance just to double check, because it may be something really cool. Watercolor is meant to be uneven too. When you apply it, it's not real, it's supposed to be stiff. Some of the, when we work in pen and ink and all that, it's more of a stiff media in general that you see. But watercolor, it kind of looks like sometimes something that maybe washed up among the ocean waves or whatever, something very natural and worn and that sort of thing. And with watercolor, for me, it's a very cool media because you can be imperfect in a way and a little bit more expressive with it, and it is a fast type of media to work with. So when you dwell on watercolor, if you're working a little bit too long, stand up and work, because you may be working a little bit too tight. So I'm being a little random here. The main thing to tell you too with watercolor, and you can see this also in my leaves, that you do actually need to leave white. You need to have some space for your eye to rest as you're working. What I think I'm going to do with my blueberry is I'm going to, after this dries, I'll introduce a bit more blue and I'm going to brighten it up a bit. What you've got to decide here is, what is the star of the show? Do you want your leaves to be the star of the show? Do you want your blueberry to be? And if so, one of these things needs to stand out more. So what may have to happen is some of these tones right here with this leaf might need to be muted if this is to be the star. And if this is going to be the star, I'm going to need to brighten up some of this stuff or add more white. So just think about that. You need to have a focal point as you're working on your piece. So I'm going to let you go on this video, but I will be back with some more progress to my work.